You ever have one of those days where your wife asks you to do one simple thing, like just one, and somehow your brain says, hey, let's ruin the whole day? That was me. She told me, Nate, handle just one thing today. And I said yes way too confidently, like a man who clearly didn't understand the assignment. That's your first hook, because anytime a husband says, I got it, that means absolutely nothing is getting got. I woke up thinking, I'm gonna show her I'm responsible. I had no idea I was about to start a chain reaction that would look like a documentary on poor decision making. I should have known things were going wrong when step one, just remembering what she told me, already felt like a group project where I was the group member who didn't read the message. So I'm standing in the kitchen, trying to figure out what she meant by just one thing. And that's when you realize wives don't give instructions, they give quests. Like, she's basically sending me on a mission with riddles. She wanted me to pick up one thing from the store. Easy, right? Except I got to the store and immediately forgot what the thing was. Now I'm walking around like a lost child. The groceries speak to me. I buy everything except the one thing she wanted. I come home proud, putting the bags down, like, look at all this stuff I got. And she just looks at me like, I ordered the wrong item on purpose. That is the moment you realize you messed up absolutely everything. But it doesn't stop there. No, because husbands can't mess up quietly. Everything becomes a dramatic event. I tried explaining myself, which is always a huge mistake. Well, technically, I did bring things, and that's when my wife starts blinking slowly. The blink that means you're not making it to tomorrow. And honestly, she's right. At this point, I'm apologizing for stuff I didn't even do. I'm apologizing for the future. I'm apologizing for hypothetical mistakes. But somehow, she still finds it adorable that I try. It's like watching a puppy attempt algebra. I put in effort, but there's no real chance of success. And in closing, I told her, next time, give me two things. That way, at least if I forget one, I'll accidentally get the other. She didn't laugh. She did the slow blink again. So I just stood there nodding, holding the one thing she wanted, which she eventually had to go buy herself. But hey, marriage is teamwork. She remembers everything. I'm here for emotional support. Even when the emotion is disappointment. I thought saying, I got this, would make me look like a responsible husband, and that's where everything went wrong. My wife asked me to do one simple thing, and I nodded confidently, like a man who had just solved world hunger with minimal effort. That's the first trap you see whenever a husband says, I got it. It's usually code for, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll look confident in what? Well, failing. I walked around the house that morning thinking about how impressive I would look when she got home. I imagined her opening the door, smiling at my competence, maybe even a little impressed by my adulting skills. Vision lasted about 30 seconds. Even before I left the house, my brain started questioning everything. Did I really understand what she asked? Was it literally one thing? Or was it a metaphor for a larger, unspoken task? I stared at the laundry basket for a moment, wondering if folding the towels counted. That's when I realized overconfidence is a dangerous thing. I grabbed a pen and paper to write down exactly what she wanted. Somehow the list made me more confused. It had bullet points I didn't understand, sub-points I didn't know existed. Suddenly, her simple request had turned into a project I might need a team of engineers to complete. I left the house trying to act normal, carrying the air of competence, like it was a shield. Every neighbor who passed me probably thought, wow, that guy's got his life together. And I just smiled, nodding, knowing the truth was far messier. That little nod of confidence felt like a setup for a joke the universe was about to tell me. It didn't disappoint. My overconfidence, my complete misjudgment of how simple one task could be, my naive belief that I could handle it without chaos set the tone for the entire day. It was a perfect storm of ambition, ignorance, and comedic timing, all wrapped up in what should have been a 5-second request. Once I left the house with that false sense of confidence, the next step hit me like a brick wall, actually understanding what she wanted. She said one thing, and my brain immediately turned it into a complex puzzle. I started questioning every possible interpretation. Did she mean one item from the store, one chore in the house, one life decision I had to make correctly? I stood in the middle of the living room, holding my keys, thinking, maybe if I just wing it, she'll be impressed by my effort. That's the trap. Winging it sounds good in theory, but in practice it's like trying to juggle knives blindfolded. Even walking to the car felt like a mental obstacle course. I kept repeating the instruction in my head, hoping I'd remember it, but instead, my mind kept generating alternative interpretations. Could it be this? No, probably not. What about this? Nah, that would be too obvious. By the time I actually got in the car, I was already exhausted from overthinking a request that was supposed to be simple. That's the beauty of this kind of comedic disaster. Every small, overanalyzed thought adds tension and makes the inevitable failure even funnier. Then came the store. I walked in with purpose, scanning the shelves, and somehow forgot entirely what I was supposed to buy. Wandered up and down the aisles like a confused tourist, picking up random items that seemed useful at the moment, but had nothing to do with the original request. Even considered buying things she didn't need just to fill the gap, thinking maybe quantity would make up for quality. Meanwhile, my confidence was slowly slipping, replaced by panic disguised as determination. Every aisle was another test. Every glance from another shopper made me feel like the protagonist in a silent comedy sketch, performing a task I was doomed to fail spectacularly. By the time I left the store, my original goal was a distant memory. I had one cart full of things I thought were helpful, none of which were what she actually asked for. They're smart. The missing interpretation had already set the stage for a day of escalating comedic chaos, and there was no turning back. Walking out of the store with a cart full of everything except the one thing she asked for, I already knew I had crossed into full-blown disaster territory. I imagined her reaction before I even got home. That's where the comedy really starts, the anticipation of judgment. I was pushing the cart down the sidewalk like a man who had accomplished something monumental, when in reality, smart. I had successfully collected a random assortment of items that might as well have been for a completely different household. Every step felt heavier because I knew deep down that the one thing she wanted, the single item that had been explicitly mentioned, was missing. Even unloading the groceries became a performance. I tried to casually place the bags on the counter, hoping she wouldn't notice. She did notice, of course. She has a way of scanning the room and instantly assessing every success and failure. That first look, the blink that says, "You really thought this was enough," hit harder than any critique I've ever received. In that moment, I realized the comedic timing of failure is perfect. It's not just the mistake itself, it's the way it lands in front of an audience who already knows the story. As I tried to explain myself, I stumbled over words listing all the things I had bought, hoping sheer volume would cover for the critical omission. I even used phrases like, well, technically, I did get some useful items, which in hindsight sounds like the desperate words of a man performing emotional acrobatics. Every item in the bag became a character in this unfolding comedy. The wrong cereal, the incorrect fruit, the extra snacks that seemed useless. Meanwhile, the dog wandered by, silently judging me with those big eyes, clearly entertained by the absurdity of my effort. By the time I finished unloading, the house felt like a stage set for humiliation. Every misstep, every forgotten item, every awkward justification was amplified by the anticipation of her reaction. The humor lies not just in the error itself, but in the buildup, the tension, and the small, silent cues that make the audience, my wife, the dog, and me, completely aware that the disaster is unfolding exactly as predicted. Coming home with all the wrong items, I was fully bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. You ever notice how one glance from your spouse can say more than any words ever could? That first slow blink, the one that silently communicates disappointment, disbelief, I told you, Sal, hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to act casual, like nothing was wrong, placing the bags on the counter and smiling confidently, but the room had already transformed into a courtroom, and I was the defendant in a trial I didn't understand. Every wrong item in those bags suddenly felt like evidence of incompetence. I was powerless to defend myself. I started explaining, which is always a terrible idea. I listed everything I had gotten, hoping the sheer volume would impress her, but instead it sounded like a desperate plea for forgiveness. I got some snacks, a fruit, and this cereal seemed healthy. I stammered, and she tilted her head, raising an eyebrow in that way that immediately cancels out any credibility I thought I had. It's the subtle art of comedic humiliation, the silence, the look, and your own realization that the more you try to explain, the worse it looks. I was tripping over words and logic simultaneously, and the dog was watching from the corner, clearly judging me silently, probably wondering how humans even survive adulthood. Even simple tasks like putting groceries away became an ordeal. Every item seemed to rebel, falling out of my arms or rolling off the counter. I felt like I was performing a high-stakes juggling act with things that had a mind of their own. The tension wasn't just in the chaos of the kitchen. It was the anticipation of her words, her glance, the judgment that I knew was coming. That slow blink, the silent critique, a layer of comedic suspense that made my every action feel both urgent and absurd. Each moment, from fumbling with the bags to trying to stay composed, was a perfect mix of tension, anticipation, inevitable laughter that only comes from watching a man spectacularly fail at the simplest task. By the time I realized how badly I had messed up, I was already deep into damage control mode. I started apologizing, not just for what I did wrong, but for all the hypothetical mistakes I might make in the future. I was talking faster than my brain could process, trying to explain that technically some of the items I bought could be useful, even if they weren't the one thing she asked for. That's the funny part about being a husband. When you fail loudly, dramatically, and with full commitment. Every word I said seemed to highlight my incompetence, but somehow it also made the entire situation more comedic. I tried to inject humor into the chaos, which was a risky move. I said things like, well, at least we'll never run out of snacks, hoping for a small chuckle or a smile. But all I got was a slow blink that could have been used in a thriller movie to communicate disappointment, judgment, mild exasperation all at once. And that's when I realized the true comedy of failure. The more you try to justify, explain, or charm your way out of it, the worse it looks, but the funnier it is to anyone observing. Even the dog seemed to lean in, watching with wide eyes, silently narrating the disaster in progress. Every attempt to organize the groceries to make it seem intentional only made things worse. Items toppled, bags split, and I felt like a circus performer in a very low-budget act where I was both the star and the punchline, kept narrating my own actions under my breath, trying to rationalize, but really just adding commentary to my own failure. The tension in the room was both palpable and hilarious because we all knew there was no recovering from this particular disaster. The absurdity, that combination of effort, chaos, and judgment is what makes these moments so memorable. The storytelling lies not in the perfection, but in the spectacular, painfully relatable way everything fell apart despite my best intentions. By the time I was done apologizing, explaining, attempting to salvage my dignity, it became clear that the real lesson wasn't about groceries, lists, or following instructions. It was about surviving the day with humor intact. Every spilled item, misstep, and awkward justification had built up to a point where the kitchen felt less like a place to cook and more like a stage for a comedy sketch. Stood there, surveying the chaos I had created, and couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. They're smart. There's something incredibly relatable about trying to do something simple, failing spectacularly, realizing that effort matters more than perfection. Even in the middle of the disaster, small victories emerged. Managed to get most of the groceries inside without dropping anything else. Avoided any trips to the emergency room despite juggling slippery bags. I maintained some semblance of composure, though the dog's judging eyes never left me. I tried to narrate my own actions like a live commentator, explaining the thought process behind every move. That only made the comedy richer. Every attempt to fix one mistake seemed to create two more. That's where the Nate-Bargatze-style humor really shines. It's not just the failure. It's the chain reaction of chaos that makes it hilarious. Finally, the most important part was seeing her reaction. Not anger, not frustration, but a mix of disbelief, amusement, and the slow blink that says, "You're lucky I love you." That's subtle. Silent communication adds tension, humor, and relatability because everyone watching knows the story is both a disaster and a triumph in its own strange way. Standing there, the middle of a kitchen full of spilled food, misplaced groceries, and lingering panic, I realized that sometimes the story isn't about getting it right. It's about trying, laughing, somehow walking away still standing. Every misstep became part of the narrative, every small disaster a punchline, every awkward apology a chance to bond over the humor of life's little catastrophes. So yeah, I tried to do one simple thing for my wife, and somehow I managed to turn it into a full-blown disaster. Forgot the one thing she actually asked for, bought everything else under the sun, and spent the rest of the day apologizing like it was my job. The kitchen looked like a tornado had hit. The dog was judging silently, and I was trying to explain myself in ways that only made me sound more ridiculous. But somehow, amidst all the chaos, there's a little magic in failing spectacularly. My wife didn't laugh at first, but she survived, and somehow we both made it to dinner without starting World War Hoodoo. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about being perfect, it's about showing up, giving it a try, laughing at yourself when life hands you chaos instead of simplicity.